What's up, dude?
Dude, I know I say like I hate our opening and how we're gonna fix it or you're gonna help me fix it, but I still hear it. I still like bob my head a little bit.
Every time.
Yeah, but I am excited though. We're gonna for the audience, we're gonna have a better opening or intro music type of thing for you, and Clayton's gonna help me with that because he's our tech guy. I'm someone that just pushes buttons on a computer essentially until something works. So I am looking forward to a kind of a sweet and crisp and original opening, for everyone.
Well, see, Jake said better. I'm going to change the qualifier and say it's going to be different.
Different, yeah,
we'll,
that too.
we'll see. We hope it's going to be better. But I'll tell you what, this podcast theme song has grown on me. And I bet you I'm not alone where now I'm at the point where when I hear that, I'm like, oh, it's time to listen to Jake and Clayton talk about some stupid stuff and get some not stupid stuff too, but a lot of stupid stuff.
What excited me though, so when Carly was here, was that just a couple days ago, I played this song while we were training in our my little home gym, and the song came on. She's like, "Oh, that's the song from the podcast."
Oh, cool.
So I was excited, like she remembered that. I'm like, okay, nice. But yeah, it's kind of going the other way for me. It's still like I like the catchy beat, but it's getting annoying. I want it to have more substance. I want it to be original. Obviously we talked about a few of the ideas, but the good thing though, it's not the most important thing in the world because there's some really good podcasts that have really cheesy openings. So it's good to know that it's not the most important thing in the world, but it's kind of cool. It makes a podcast original if you have an original one, obviously.
I feel like it's kind of like the opening to a sitcom. A lot of times we first hear an opening to a sitcom and we're like, oh, that's a song. You know what I mean? But then we start to grow and we start to love the sitcom, and then it's reinforced time and time every time the show starts. Yeah. So you hear it 4 times an hour, right? And so it's reinforced constantly, consistently with. If it's a good show, your laughter and your endorphin release, and like knowing that you're gonna go and enjoy this half hour with these characters, and so you really see. I feel like Smartless is a podcast that has a really good example of that. When I first heard their theme song, I was like, oh, like what? Come on, guys, what are you doing? And now when I hear it, I'm like, you know what I mean? So,
yeah, it's associated with like what's to come. It's fascinating. This isn't exactly the same thing. We probably talked about this before, but how with marketing for like a product, so it's a little different than what we're talking about now. But for example, like brushing your teeth, like toothpaste, when it was originally being marketed, they were trying to find a way to associate like an action with the product because it gets people to purchase it and then want to actually do it. Right. So for example, when they started marketing toothpaste, I think it was it the early 1900s when they first started doing it. So, or maybe it was after World War I. But anyways, though, the minty like kind of aftertaste that we get from toothpaste, I learned this just like a month or two ago, that actually has nothing to do with like your mouth being clean. They do that. It's associated with like, I'm going to brush my teeth. I'm looking for that minty feeling afterward that you get, but that actually has nothing to do with your mouth being clean. That was done intentionally, and then apparently it worked.
That's nuts, dude.
Yeah, so kind of interesting. Kind of like it reminded me of an intro for a sitcom or a podcast. Yeah. You hear that, and then it associates you with enjoying that podcast after, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's real. It's real, man. Psychology is crazy when you really get into it, and as someone like who's just studied a little bit, like I would put both of us in that category. It's really just scratching the tip of the iceberg. You know what I mean? Scratching the tip of the iceberg. Is that combining scratching the surface and the tip of the iceberg? I think I did just combine those two.
You might have, but I knew what you meant, and I didn't even like question it in my head. I knew what you meant.
Nice. Scratching the tip of the iceberg.
Scratching the tip of an iceberg. That can be our little new quote or something.
I don't want to make it gross, but it almost sounds like a euphemism.
Well, you made it gross just by saying that. Oops.
Whoopsie.
Oops. You want to get into our fitness focus for the day for this Friday debrief.
Friday debrief. Yes.
All right, sweet. Yeah, so as you guys know, with the Friday debrief, we do try to keep it a little bit shorter for you guys because it's Friday. A lot of you, want to get out of here or start your day or Friday night, depending on when you are listening to it. So we do try to keep it a little bit shorter and to the point. So it's not going to be one of our, 1 to 2 hour type of episodes. So
No
for
football today.
yeah, no football. Yeah, no football today. We'll wait till like tomorrow or something for that. We got to give you guys got to give you guys a break from football. We're getting a little obsessed over here, but nothing new. So
to be fair, we're getting down to like in another couple weeks. We won't hear us talk about it again for what? It's 4 months,
2
5
weeks.
months.
In 2 weeks until the draft. Until the draft is coming up. So
that's fair.
Yeah. So for today, everyone, we are gonna go over the 15 best fit tips. And when I say best here, these are just things I feel are some of the most important. This is not, an exclusive list. There could be hundreds of these that could be argued that are just as important. So these are some that we find very important, and most of them are pretty simple too. We also wanted everything to be relatively simple today and not give you anything too crazy. I think simple is normally the way to go. In the fire department, we used to have an acronym. The fire department didn't make this up, but KISS, so keep it simple, stupid.
Yep.
Just when remembering all these protocols and things that we needed to do. So sometimes I feel like that's the answer, is keeping it simple. When
it's so sorry, Adam, but it's so funny you say that because we're talking literally just before I got on here. So I've been working on 2 projects concurrently, like not project. I do work on 2 projects concurrently. I'm working on my music and I'm working on this, right? And literally, as like I've been working like last night since we got off into this morning before we got on, and my main focus has been simplify because I'm coming in with these wordy phrases and like the music, and it's like simplistic. Like I said, I personally prefer the keep it simple, silly. I feel like it's a little less harsh, but keep it simple, stupid is absolutely there's no substitute for like taking a step back and being like, okay, have I overcomplicated things? Because chances are, at least for me, I have.
Yeah, no, I hear that. So we'll start with number 1. You could argue this may be number 1 as in it's the most important. Yeah. The rest of the list, it's not necessarily in any certain order, but this to me may be the most important out of anything. This could be having a perfect nutrition regimen or training regimen or all the other things. So number 1 is consistency is king for success. And where do we even start with how important this is? Because you could have these perfect workout programs. You can pay all this money for programming, for having a coach, for everything. Nothing is going to matter unless you are consistent.
Right.
And it's challenging, especially maybe in the beginning if you're just getting into your fitness journey, because some people might not see results right away. So it's hard to be consistent at first. It's like you're putting in all this work, doing in all these things, but you might not see anything tangible. But if you stick to it, if you are consistent, you will start seeing results eventually. What do you have for consistency? I wanted some big, profound thing to say, but that's all that came out there with consistency.
No, I think that was perfect. You really hit the nail on the head. This can be a little bit of a tricky thing as a trainer because your job is to kind of share the tools and teach the tools for success, but it's hard to teach consistency because there's a lot of factors involved. And I've found in that in my own experience, as successful a key as consistency is, that lack of consistency can be just as effective a killer of progress and moving forward. Because it seems obvious on the surface, but there's a deeper psychological impact of losing that consistency, losing the habit, because as we go on to say throughout, I think it's actually the next point, motivation is not always going to get the job done. It just isn't. Yep. Motivation doesn't work that way. Motivation is something that we feel strongly some days and other days we don't. And So if you're relying on motivation to give you consistency, you're gonna have problems. But if you're going for consistency, as opposed to trying to just work out when you're motivated, you're gonna create discipline, which is the real, I would argue that the subtext in this is discipline is the key to success, because consistency is, but discipline is a key to consistency, right?
Agreed. And think of it this way too. Some of you have maybe done this before, know someone. You get really into fitness for periods of time, and I'm going to go 7 days a week and hardcore and all that. So that's great. I'm all about that. That's awesome. But who's going to be successful in the long run? The person that goes 7 days a week and does that for 2 months and then doesn't train the rest of the year, versus the person that takes the approach. I'm going to start with maybe a couple sessions a week, but I'm going to do that no matter what. And then maybe over time, if you find it works for your schedule and your life and you're feeling good and you want to add in a few more sessions a week, awesome. So that person that is consistent, it's going to beat that hardcore, I'm going 7 days a week, but can't maintain that past a few months. So that's another big consideration with consistency.
Totally.
So moving on to number 2, Clayton, you just said this. I loved it, talking about the motivational part. So number 2 is make fitness part of your routine. And the second part of that was stop relying on the need to feel motivated. Motivation, yes, it does drive human behavior, absolutely, but we can't rely on these feelings or emotions before we act upon, going to the gym or training or whatever you're doing. That's a recipe for, just disaster. Make it part of your routine. Eventually, here's the cool thing. It might feel like a lot of effort at first. As you continue to do it, it is going to become a habit. And it's fascinating because once it's a habit, it's almost a subconscious thing. This is just part of your day. This is just something you do. It's not something you have to feel like you're dragging your feet toward, every single morning. And one little tip that could help you create this sustainable habit, I started doing this a while ago, and I noticed for me, it helped and also made it a little bit easier in the morning because I train in the morning. I would get my stuff ready the night before. So as a reminder, okay, I'm waking up, I'm training, I'm getting all this done in the morning. So I would set my clothes up or my clothes out and my shoes out the night before. So right when I would wake up, that would be a signal. Okay, I see this, I'm getting ready, I'm going to the gym. I'd also have everything else ready that I could. My water jug's already full in the morning, ready to go, sitting there. And if you can, not everyone can make their breakfast the night before, but depending on what you eat, you could get that ready. If you're a coffee drinker, you could have all that ready to go. So you are setting yourself up for success beforehand. So all these things, all these steps, they impact each other. So our goal, we want to set ourselves up for success before. If you do this stuff the night before, especially if you're someone that struggles with consistency and wanting to train and you struggle with discipline, by setting these things up, there's way more of a shot that you're going to be successful in following through with that. You start with one little thing. Okay, I'm going to put on my clothes right now. Okay, I'm going to lace up my shoes. I'm going to get my butt out the door. Okay, I'm at the gym. Some people might have to take that approach, depending where you are in your fitness journey. So make it part of your routine and stop relying on the feelings of motivation. I also will say, too, as you do this, you'll probably feel more motivated as time goes on.
Yeah, they work hand in hand. And absolutely, it's really important when we're talking about, making a habit to recognize that we are by nature habit-driven animals. Or let's see if we want to make it even less controversial. We are habit-driven by nature. So let's leverage that to our advantage as opposed to our disadvantage, say with like the chips in front of the TV at night. That's a habit too.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Right. And not to say I'm not demonizing that. Believe me, I've killed my fair share of chips in front of the TV at night. So it's not, not a judgment thing as much as it's saying we have the opportunity to build constructive habits. Let me even take a further step back. We are going to build habits one way or another. We can direct them towards destruction, or we can direct them towards construction. And these are the tips for directing towards construction.
Yep, absolutely. And moving on to number 3, use your fitness to optimize your life or your lifestyle. Now, what I mean by that, so for example, I'm just going to give you my personal anecdote again, and Clayton, you can give yours as well if you'd like. So for me, one of the many reasons I train, I like to feel good. So I like to train in the morning because it sets me up for success the rest of the day with feeling good. If you're someone that trains because you want some stress relief type of a thing, maybe from your job or a stressful life that you have, some may benefit going after work. It totally depends on you and your life. You may use that to calm down a little bit. You may use it for some clarity purposes or whatever it is to help de-stress from your life. And then also too, another consideration, using your fitness to optimize your lifestyle will be the type of training you do. If you have a very, very stressful life and job, and you're not sleeping a lot, I still want you to move. I still want you to be active, but we might need to reel back something, say, like intensity and doing high intensity interval training 7 days a week. If you are not sleeping a lot and you have a stressful job, that might not be setting yourself up for success to, optimize your lifestyle. So those are just a few considerations to think about, along with why you do fitness in general. We all have different reasons for doing it, but most of us, I feel, do fitness, at least part of it. We do want to optimize our life if we can.
So for me, this is a really key point in this whole conversation. I would even argue, while you can't argue, like while consistency is king is like kind of inarguably number one, I would put this right up there with it, because it similarly to discipline, using your fitness to optimize your lifestyle it has been for me at least, and I think for most people, is a really important factor when considering making something consistent in your life. If it's working against you in your normal life, if you're somebody who I don't know if you just use this example, but if you're somebody who's so busy that you don't have time to do everything, you just did mention this. You want to work out differently than somebody who sits around all day and doesn't have like a stressful job, right? And that doesn't mean necessarily you do less work. It just means you do different work, right?
Yep.
It means you, like Jake said, you might lighten the intensity of the load, et cetera, et cetera. To the point of, or I should say, to give you more firsthand knowledge and example, for me, this was really the key to me finding myself comfortable in my own program. I spent a lot of years, especially being raised by a trainer, kind of doing things the way I was taught. And for me, there was a turning point when I went from doing things the way I was taught to all of a sudden using the skills I was taught in a way that worked for me. And that took me a lot of years. I didn't figure that out until I was in my 20s. But I'll tell you, once I did, what happened for me is it shifted. Working out and exercise shifted from being something that I felt like I had to do in order to feel good into now it's something that I get to do because I feel good. You know what I mean? Which might seem like a subtle difference, but in reality, it's night and day. It's black and white, because in one key, it's this thing that adds to your list of all the other shit you got to do, right? And nobody wants to add another thing to their list of things to do. We're all hella busy, right? But if you can switch that to something that relieves you of that burden of life, that relieves you of the stress from your work, that relieves you of, the back pain that you have from lifting your kid 30 times a day, all of a sudden it becomes a whole different thing, right? It's not so difficult to make a behavior that makes your life hella easier consistent. It's a lot easier, certainly, than something that's working against you, right?
Absolutely. Love that. All right, we're already at number 4 here. And number 4 is train in a way that you enjoy but challenges you as well. So there's going to be a sweet spot that you'll feel. And here's the reason I say this. So too little of a challenge with anything, and there is going to be no purpose.
Yep.
Now, I don't want to discourage someone from, if they're starting something like a fitness routine and they've never done that before, I want you to take small steps at first. The point being, after you get going for a little while, if you spend your entire life and the most challenging thing that you do is, I'm going to walk for 30 seconds every day. After, maybe a month of doing that or so, you might want to up the challenge a little bit. That was a bad example, but you guys get what I'm saying. So we want it to be challenging enough to where you do find purpose in it. And there's something very stimulating when you have just enough challenge in what you're doing. And the second part of that is having too big of a challenge. If something is so challenging where we are failing all the time, that might be a deterrent for some people to keep going. Everyone's different, but if we are looking at the general population of people, if you fail all the time and there's no little wins or little success along the way, there's less of a chance that you're going to be consistent. And as you can see, all these kind of loop back to the other ones that we already talked about and kind of go hand in hand. So find that sweet spot. Now, this number I'm going to give you, this isn't specific to fitness. This is just hopefully a way you can kind of picture what I'm talking about. So some studies have shown that when starting a new endeavor or skill, craft, or whatever it is you're doing, you want to fail about 15% of the time. So you're successful 85% of the time. I know that number seems a little random, but if you can kind of picture that. So most of the time you're doing well, you're doing your thing, you're successful, but that 15 or 20% of the time there is a little bit of failure. That's where the challenge is. And I feel like somewhere in there is the sweet spot. I know those numbers don't perfectly carry over to fitness, but I hope you guys, understand the picture I'm kind of drawing right here.
I feel like that number was amazingly. I feel like I heard 15%. I was thinking about it. I was like, yeah, I'd say about 15% of the time is that I'm really pushing failure. You know what I mean? Like I tell my clients, we want to drive towards it, but we don't want to fail. We don't want every single set to be complete failure. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I want to take a step back and simplify this for my own purposes. Too little challenge is boring. Too much challenge will hurt you.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I love it. Simple and very true. And moving on to number 5, and this is slowly becoming more of a known thing, which I absolutely love. And this is resistance training is for everybody. Now, I mean everybody.
Yeah.
Yes, there's certain situations, of course, where someone can't resistance train, but for the most part, resistance train is for everyone. Yep. Think of even, the geriatric population.
Especially.
Thank you. Especially the geriatric population. If they resistance train, think of how much higher their quality of life is going to be. Something as simple as standing up from the couch or a chair or anything like that. If you are strong enough to do that, you are going to feel so much better. It's strength training is like the fountain of youth, essentially.
Not only that, but I don't have the information in front of me, so I would have to find it. But there is a correlation between grip strength and living longer. And the reason why it's a correlation, it's not causal, but the correlation is because the assumption is that when we're training, we're improving our grip strength. And when we're elderly, a lot of times folks kind of end up dying because of a fall, right? So if you're training, you're doing resistance training and you're improving your grip strength, and then you slip and fall, you have a much higher chance of grabbing yourself and holding yourself up. So again, it's correlational. So we're not sitting here saying, extra, do resistance work will keep you alive longer, but it could. And the information shows that.
Absolutely. So whether it's, the elderly population we just discussed, whether it's athletes, that one's completely obvious, or it is the everyday person that wakes up, goes to their 9 to 5 and comes home. It's going to benefit everyone, even kids too. There used to be this huge fear that, teenagers can't resistance train because it's going to stunt their growth or something. Right. That's not true. Resistance training is completely safe if you do it in a safe, smart, and effective way. So if, you do have a young kid that is doing it, of course, I would have a professional there taking them through the movements, or if, you're capable of doing that, absolutely. And when they're young, it's more of a body awareness thing. Don't worry about pushing the weight or anything like that. They're just really learning how to move their body appropriately. But still, regardless, resistance training is definitely for everyone.
One of the things that I get the most often has been particularly women who are concerned about getting bulky. And I was, for me, it comes back to one of the most well-known Arnold quotes. It goes something like, when they said, "We don't want to look like you," Arnold said, "Don't worry, you never will." On the surface, of course, that's Arnold being arrogant and, cocky and all that. But under the surface, there's meaning. And what that meaning is he didn't just lift and make this happen. You know what I mean? Is like he lifted harder, heavier than, majority, 90% of the population, probably more higher than that. You know what I mean? And the real key, at least, in the context of what's pertinent in my own life, and I think for most of us, is anybody who puts on a lot of weight, they had to eat for it. So nobody is putting on bulk without intentionally doing so.
Yeah, good point.
Right. So it's this kind of funny misnomer where people think that if you lift, you're going to get bulky. But in fact, anyone who's tried to get bulky can tell you that it doesn't work like that. You just have to keep eating, and you have to keep eating. It's more about nutrition. I mean, I shouldn't say more. It's chicken and egg as always. But, nutrition is just as important when you're talking about gaining muscle weight as it is. Or I don't know. I've kind of lost the point. The point is, you got to work for that.
Yeah, it's something that doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah.
That is, like getting that big, the people that you see in the gym that are very muscular, like the ones that maybe look like Arnold or even, 2/3 of that, that's a very intentional thing pursued over a lifetime for most people. You don't just accidentally wake up and all of a sudden you're bulky and, 280 pounds with 8% body fat like that. That's not something you have to be concerned about. People can train their whole life and never look like that. In fact, 99.9% of humans wouldn't look like that even if they tried, regardless if it was a female or a male. It wouldn't matter.
Yeah, and that's like you just touched on genetics. I mean, that's not even like there's a factor in there that we can't even touch, literally even. So anyway, not to go off on that tangent.
I was telling Adeline that yesterday. I was like, I could train, the rest of my life, even if I supplemented with steroids, which I don't. Even if I did that, I still would never get that big because a huge part of it is genetics, and I've heard bodybuilders talk about it. People think it's just the steroids that gets in there. It's that, but it's their genetics as well. They're the 0.1% of the population, so that's also something to consider. And moving on to, we're already at number 6 here, and this is eat mostly whole foods. Yeah. And
not the company.
Not the
Don't eat the company. Don't eat the company whole foods.
Yeah, so it's really cool too that with eating whole foods, for most people, you're going to want this to be the foundation of what you eat. So the foods that aren't heavily processed. Now, if you're someone that does a high amount of training, or you're an athlete, you're on your feet 8 hours a day, then it starts to get to where you're going to need a lot more processed foods just to get enough calories in. But for most people, the ones, that are semi-active or you train a couple times a week, whole foods should be the staple or the foundation of your nutrition. I think it's a very sustainable approach, though. Don't negate foods that you enjoy eating every once in a while. Just do it in moderation. There's no need to only eat chicken and broccoli the rest of your life. That normally does not work for longevity. Most people aren't going to be able to do that.
It's ripe for a binge.
Yeah, exactly. And eating whole foods, if you don't do that currently, if you start doing that, you're going to feel so much better. That is one thing I noticed when I'm eating more whole foods. My energy levels are up. I'm less bloated. I feel way better in the gym. Yeah. So plenty of whole foods, and then save some room for stuff that you enjoy. Just it has to be done in moderation.
I can't emphasize how much I agree with Jake. In fact, I would like to give you guys a little tool to test this out yourselves. Sometime when you're hungry, don't wait till you need fuel in your body, but you're starting to get hungry and you're going to notice the difference in what you eat. I want you to try just a piece of white bread and just that, and you're going to get hungry pretty quick and eat when you need to eat. The next day or the next time you have the opportunity to do that, try to do the same thing with a piece of wheat bread. Or even better yet, you're making a sandwich. Make a piece of bread with white bread, or even a piece of sandwich with white bread and then a sandwich with wheat bread. Test them, experiment. Jake has said before, we want to be, what was it? We want to be the scientist and the
And the artists.
And the artist, right? And this is where the scientist part comes in. Don't just take our word for it that whole foods are going to be more filling, and or like the rest of like the world, because it's pretty common knowledge at this point. But test it out for yourself. Check nutrient density. Check nutrient density is an important conversation or part of this conversation. But in terms of whole foods, as soon as we start breaking down an apple or whatever we have, all of our processed foods are whole foods that we've chopped up and like mixed together. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, we get a little heady sometimes thinking about like, oh, McDonald's versus an apple. Like, no, it's just like, don't, like, if your food comes off of a tree or comes from like an animal or comes from like, and it hasn't been like jacked up and mixed up with other stuff, yeah, you're good.
Yeah. And also, too, like I said, nothing wrong with eating some processed foods.
Yeah.
Most people do. Obviously, there's just something to consider. There's a behavior component that you want to remember with processed foods. So, like for me, for example, Clayton mentioned this earlier in the show. If I grab a bag of family-size Doritos or Sun Chips or something, I mean, I'm crushing that whole thing.
Yeah.
Like eating a 2,000 calorie bag of family size of chips, that is less satiating than me eating just a normal meal that would have chicken, potatoes, and broccoli, something like that. I would be way more full consuming whole foods because they're voluminous. They're normally more micronutrient dense.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to make you feel more full. So that's just something to consider. Some people do have foods where I don't want to say don't eat them, but just understand when you eat them, they're so palatable, it might be hard to stop eating them, at least for me. So just keep that in mind. Don't be fear-mongered into not ever eating foods you enjoy, but there are foods that can trigger us a little bit.
Well, when we look at it from a marketing standpoint, chips and stuff that are like chips, they have a lot of air, they've got a lot of crunch, and they've got very little nutrients, right? So basically what you've got is a food product, not a food. You've got a food product that is literally designed to trick your brain into thinking that it's getting nutrients. And because that crunch in nature, if you think about it, that crunch in nature, that's typically a sign of fiber, right? Or I think fiber, that's the thing that's fair to say. But it's a sign that crunch, that flavor usually is a sign of nutrients. And what happens is when we're sitting and eating that bag, our brain is getting all these signals that say, oh, we're eating nutrients, but the body is not actually receiving any of that nutrients. So we're feeding, but we're not fueling. And we can get into the specifics of where each food falls on that list. But the idea is that, like we always talk about on this podcast, what are we doing and why? Don't stay away from that bag of delicious chips. Just know that you're eating it because you want to eat the chips, not because you're fueling your body. You know what I mean? Like, So for a good example is if you do kill that bag of chips, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not going to eat until tomorrow because I ate so many calories. I would argue that you get actual food in your belly, get proper nutrients in your body, because what's going to happen is your body's craving that nutrients and it's not, that hasn't gotten. So you're going to fill that, you're going to fuel yourself, and then you're going to be ready to kind of live your life normal the next day. If you don't eat food because of all those chip calories you ate and you didn't have proper nutrition in the evening, you're going to wake up the next day ravenous and probably going to want to satiate your hunger with another bag of chips. And this is how we get into this cyclical, habit-based, trap.
Absolutely. And moving on to number 7, which goes hand in hand with this a little bit, and this is eat plenty of protein. Something I've noticed for most people, especially if you follow more of the American type of diet, most people, especially women, but most people don't eat enough protein. So protein, obviously, there's tons of benefits, and it's essential for the human body. It's, the building blocks for the body and muscle tissue. It makes up enzymes that power chemical reactions, and it helps with building muscle tissue, as you all know, and then also with your immune system. So beyond just muscle building and all those effects, it is incorporated in having a healthy immune system. But people really do struggle with getting enough protein. And and this number is going to be different for everyone. So this is a general statement. But most people, that are, say, eating 50 grams of protein a day will benefit strongly if you start eating something like 3/4 of a gram of protein per pound of body weight, or even up to a gram per pound of body weight. You are going to feel satiated. You're going to feel a little bit more recovered from your workouts. It's going to be easier to build muscle tissue. And you will see a lot of things online if you're looking, how much protein do I need per day. And just remember, when you read some of these charts, there's a huge difference between what you need to survive and what you would need to actually thrive. And for someone that is really active, someone that resistance trains like a lot of you do, you don't have to be concerned. A healthy person doesn't have to be consumed with over consuming protein. I've never seen anyone even do that. You'll probably be challenged enough to even get a gram of protein per pound of body weight. So take a look at your protein. Everyone's going to be a little bit different, of course, but make sure, I'm just going to say that you're consuming enough of it. And protein should be the main focus of most of your meals. So make sure you are getting enough.
Perfect. I don't even want to add anything to that, except I will add that as we learned, protein is the most satiating macronutrient.
That's right.
So we'll call back for anybody who was listening to episode 70. I'm not even gonna say it because you guys will have to find it, but it's important,
Yep, most satiating for sure. And moving on here to number 8. So success goes beyond the scale. So stop obsessing over it. Now, the scale can be used as a great tool. I do personally feel some people emphasize it too much.
Yeah.
If you aren't someone that is an athlete or doing something weight-based where you need to be a certain weight, I don't think it should be the only tool in your toolbox. Yes, it's a great way to track. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but I've seen this happen a lot with people. So the weight on the scale isn't going down very much, but they do notice they feel a little bit leaner. Their pants might be a little bit looser around the waist. Things like that. To me, that's more important. That's more what you're going for. I don't think most people, unless you're significantly overweight, but most people don't care so much about their weight versus, how they look, how they feel, and all of that. So I do think people overdo it with the scale just a little bit.
I agree. I have a client who's at this point, he's my longest term client, and actually I consider him a good friend as well. But when we first started working together, this is one of the I come to him and he was like, "Oh, here's my scale." And I was like, and I kind of walked out and I was like, I don't want to be like, no, but like, I was like, well, to be honest with you, I kind of stay away from the scale personally because it can be as much, if not more of a detriment than an advantage. It's great when you're losing scale weight and, you can see that you're leaner and stronger and you get that good feeling. It's that reward, it's like, good job, me, right? And that's great. We love that. But in my experience, what happens more often is, you get that maybe 1 out of 5 times, 1 out of 10 times where you're, or let's say 1 out of 5 times where you're like, really good. And then the other 4 times you're either the same weight or you're a little bit heavier and you're there's some kind of subconscious like, well, what's wrong with me, right? Why didn't I do what I needed to do to lose that weight? And the reality is what Jake just said, scale weight can ultimately mean nothing in regards to your overall health. Because what happens is, as we gain muscle weight and we lose fat weight, our scale weight oftentimes will stay right at the same point. Perfect example for me, I was 225, and I was carrying around a lot of fat weight. And what I did was I started, I immediately changed my nutrition. I changed some medication I was on, and I started working out, very intentionally. And what happened is I lost like 25 pounds in the first couple weeks. For like 2 or 3 weeks, I lost a bunch of that fat weight. And then from that point, we're about 205 for the last 8-9 months, I'd say. I've been right around that mark. I've been between 200 and 205. I float right around 200, and I've been there for a while now. But throughout that 8-9 months, my waist has gotten smaller. My pants have gotten, looser. Well, actually, that's funny because my waistline has gotten looser, but my thigh, my legs and my calves have gotten, the pant legs have gotten tighter because I've built muscle, right? So I look at myself in the mirror. For me, I am the strongest. I'm the combination of strongest and leanest I've ever. I'm not the strongest I've been. I'm not the leanest I've ever been, but I'm the combination strongest, leanest I've ever been, right? So arguably, I'm the healthiest physically I've ever been in my life. And I've been the same weight for the last 9 months, though my body appearance and the way I feel has changed dramatically.
And so, yeah, everyone, just if you want to use a scale, absolutely do it. It is a tool in the toolbox. But if you do decide to, I would recommend weighing yourself at the same time every day, just so it's a little bit more accurate. You know, so if first thing in the morning after you go pee, weigh yourself, and I would weigh yourself at that time every day because your weight can fluctuate. There's times where my weight will fluctuate anywhere from 6 to 10 pounds in one day, depending on, water weight, depending on what my meal was the night before. So just keep that in mind if you do decide to use a scale.
Absolutely.
And number 9, we just talked about this. Was this yesterday or the episode before? Optimizing sleep. So don't go along with the old advice of waiting until you die to sleep. Terrible advice. We talked about this before.
It might happen sooner.
Yeah, seriously. No, seriously. Like sleeping, optimizing your sleep is going to positively affect everything else that we already talked about. If you don't optimize your sleep, everything else that we talked about so far is going to be twice as hard. Everything from nutrition and wanting to eat more whole foods to being consistent in training, all these things, it's going to be a lot harder if you don't optimize sleep. We're not going to go into all the details that we did the other day. If you guys want to listen to what episode number was that? Was that 75?
I think it was, I want to say it was 76.
Okay, so you guys are going to see.
Guys.
It was one of the last episodes. It was a Friday debrief, and we talked about optimizing your sleep, and we gave you guys I think it was 8 steps to do so. So go back and listen to that. But just understand sleeping, optimizing your sleep, it's going to positively affect everything else that we talked about today so far and that we're going to talk about.
2 things. Sleep, we rebuild our muscles while we sleep. Second thing is sleep dictates our circadian rhythms, which dictate everything else.
Yep. Amen. And moving on to number 10, we touched on this yesterday in our podcast, and this is progressive overload. So if there's any principle to understand when you're in the gym, it's progressive overload. So all that means, just a quick review, it's over time. We're challenging ourselves a little bit more than we were previously. An example like we were talking about yesterday would be you bench press 100 pounds for 10 reps today. Maybe the next time you bench press, or a month from now, you bench press 105 pounds for 10 reps. So the idea being slowly over time, we're challenging ourselves a little bit more, or we're adding more weight, we are adding more sets, or improving our range of motion, whatever it is. So just something to keep in mind as you progress in the gym.
Oh, sorry. Were you leaving me a space there? No,
did you have anything else for that one?
Yeah. No, I didn't. That was
cool.
Killing it.
Number 11. Oh, and I love this. I'm a little biased with this, but there is research to back it up. So walking. I love walking.
Yeah, me
and
too.
I think it is one of the most underrated tools for health. And here is why. This is what I love. It's accessible to everyone, no matter where you live. Even if you don't want to walk outside, you can walk around your house. I do that sometimes when it's cold. Why not?
Absolutely.
And there's essentially no skill or low skill with it. It's not like running. So just about everyone can do it. And studies have shown that if you walk at least 2.5 hours a week, right away, that's already 30% less risk of heart disease. It's going to lower your risk of cancer, lower your blood pressure, your cholesterol. And there's been studies showing it's as effective. This is resistance training as well, but it's as effective as medication for mild or moderate depression. So that is an amazing thing to know. And also, it's a great tool in the sense for people that are looking for fat loss. It's one of those things a lot of people don't think about.
Yeah,
if you track your steps every day, people that have higher steps, I mean, that could, even if you want to, that could replace a standard aerobic session that some people have. I'm not saying don't do that.
Right.
But having all those steps a day, it's going to assist you in your goals for sure.
if you think about the fact that you have the opportunity to add a single staircase to your daily routine, say that you take the elevator every day, just throwing in stairs instead of taking the elevator, not saying it has to be an incline, but if you choose in your day-to-day life to walk in a situation where you normally wouldn't, that's going to burn, say, I don't know, let's say 100 calories, right? 100 extra calories that day that you're going to burn because you took that walk. Over a week, that's 700 extra calories. Over 2 weeks, that's 1,400 extra calories. You know, you add that up over a year. I'm not going to do the math because I'm going to get it wrong, but that is the amount of calories that it would have taken you, say, 10 aerobics classes to match, that you would have had to like make a point of getting to and paying for and doing all this stuff. Or you could have just walked a little more. Not to say the two things are equal, as Jake said, because you're going to get your heart rate up in that aerobics class and that's, you know, its own advantage. But from a purely movement standpoint, well, let me even say there's no substitute for a body in movement. When we're considering a body that's not in movement versus a body that is in movement, that's when you start seeing all these things like the, effect on mild and moderate depression, the lower risk of diabetes and heart disease, et cetera, et cetera.
Moving on to number 12, and this is active recovery. So especially, this is more for people, the ones of you that get after it every day. You push it in the gym, you do some hard resistance training, maybe you CrossFitters out there, athletes, whoever it is. So active recovery, essentially, it's a day where the intensity is way down, and the goal of that day is just to move. You're not necessarily trying to, improve with the amount of weight you lift or anything like that. You're just trying to move and improve in that sense. So an example of active recovery, this could be anything from walking. This could be you are in the gym, but you're performing movements very, very light just to get the extra circulation and blood flowing around your body and bringing oxygen to all your muscles. And I have noticed too, if you do active recovery days, so these really light days, not only are you going to feel better, for me, I have seen that I'm less sore after I do this. So say I had a hard leg workout, the next day my hamstrings or something are sore, and if I do very light movements involving my hamstrings, they're going to be less sore and they're just going to feel better.
Totally. Yeah, I'm right there with you with that too. It's we don't spend enough time focusing on the recovery aspect, generally speaking, because, we start to associate this really feeling good with the actual exercise. So we keep exercising, but that's not always the best move, right? So taking that moment to really, like Jake says, it doesn't mean you need to not do anything that day. Although if that sounds appealing to you, you should do nothing that particular day if that's helpful to you. If that's not appealing to you, something like Jake's saying, where some light movement really makes a big difference. For example, like what I'll do is on my recovery days, sometimes we've talked about, I play a lot of video games, so I have periods of time where I'm kind of sitting, and so what I'll do is I've got a little desk cycle, and so it's like a little recumbent bike that's just pedals, like a little machine that sits on the ground. Yeah, shout out Bill, thank you for that. And it's not like a tool I use to like get I don't use it to progress myself in my training, but on my recovery day, I'll sit it in front of, as I'm sitting in front of the TV playing games, and I'll just sit there with moving my legs. And I've had friends be like, recovery day? I'm like, recovery day.
Love it. Yeah, for me, what I do Wednesdays, it's always more of a cardio focused day. I don't lift any weights, or if there was anything involving movement like resistance training, it'd be something super light, but it's mainly completely cardio focused. And then Sunday for me, that's more of my recovery day. And the only thing I'll do on Sunday is, like go for walks or something like that. And I found that's most optimal for me. You're going to find what works for you. Just test it out. Some people do well with, taking a day a week where you're not having much movement at all. Me personally, I need to move to feel better. I just make sure on those days that it's light and it's not like a normal training day. All right, moving on to number 13. This is another one that's very underrated, and this is getting plenty of sunlight. Something I noticed with this too, if I am getting plenty of sunlight, I might not notice the positive effects while it is happening. But when I don't get sunlight, then I start noticing something feels off. In sunlight, as we know, it's going to help with the production of vitamin D, which is important for your immune system. But also, too, if you don't get sunlight, there's a chance that you could have lower levels of serotonin. And serotonin is what helps boost your mood and just giving you feelings of calmness and all that. So without it, you could feel a little bit more anxious. Some people definitely do, and your mood just won't feel the same. So getting out and getting at least a little bit of sunlight every day is beneficial for people. I like to, when I can, get out multiple times a day and be in the sun. And I do like to take walks in the sun when I can.
One of the most used antidepressants is called an SSRI, and what that is selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Basically, the way that they work is they allow your serotonin to collect instead of being reabsorbed into the brain, so that you have more of it available to use in your brain processes. Granted, that's a very rudimentary description of that. The reason why I give you all that is to say, by getting out in the sunlight, you help your body to create greater levels of serotonin, effectively accomplishing the same goal of this selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying it's the same thing, nor am I saying I'm a doctor with any, kind of background with, where I can speak to the specifics of this. Within the context of what we're talking about here, it's really important that that we recognize that everything is connected. And while I can't sit here and say, make sure you get the sun so that you don't have to take your SSRI, there is an intermixing of those systems that your doctor can inform you in better detail about how they can help each other improve.
And then moving right on to number 14. And then instead of just exercising, train or practice. Now, the first time I was informed of this was, shout out to Mike Studley. He was on one of the first episodes of the podcast. So Mike Studley owned a CrossFit gym back in San Diego. And especially with CrossFit, when I used to do it, the expectation for most people is, you perform it at high intensity. And there's times where that's just not going to happen. You can't perform something high intensity every day and, never have time to recover for it. So one of the things that I was taught and started implementing, into my everyday life with even the strength training I do now is, instead of just exercising, practice or train the lifts. And what I mean by that, work on becoming more proficient or efficient with the movements that you're performing. So this means some days it might not be adding more weight. This might mean, okay, during my squat, I want to work on keeping a more rigid spine. Or during my deadlift, I want my lumbar to not flex quite as much. Or, back to squatting, I want my knees to go past my toes a little bit more today so I can work on activating my quads a little bit more. So whatever it is, view these movements as practicing and not this thing necessarily where it has to be the heaviest possible that you can lift every time you are picking up that barbell or you are performing that movement. And this has helped me tremendously. Also change your mindset a little bit. If you have a competitive mindset and you're trying to hit your records every week with your lifts, if we have that perception shift of, I'm practicing today, I'm training today, I'm not just going to crush myself every single day.
Totally. I like to look at this in the sense of, how do we gamify something? When we talk about gamifying something, for those of us who are really interested in like playing games and stuff, there's a subtle shift in psychology from I'm doing this because it needs to be done to, okay, I'm doing this and I expect that I'm going to hit challenges that I need to overcome, right? So that's when we talk about training versus exercising. When we're talking about exercising, it's not inherent that there's going to be a challenge that you need to overcome. As soon as you start talking about training or practicing, in the very words is the acceptance that we are going to challenge our comfort, where we're at. We're going to grow in some way, right? Because when we're exercising, we're not necessarily growing. But if we're training and we're practicing, if we're doing it effectively, we are growing. And, when I talk about gamifying something, you're not doing anything different in your actions, but the way you're thinking about it has shifted from this like thing that you have to do to, okay, let's get better. Let's do this better. And all of a sudden it becomes fun. As soon as it becomes fun, it takes away all the all of the all of the
Yeah. And then this number 15, which is going to be the last one for the day, goes hand in hand with what Clayton was just saying. And this is falling in love with the process. Now this, even though it's number 15, it's one of my favorites on this list for sure. Now, let me just kind of give you an example. And we've brought up the book Atomic Habits by James Clear multiple times. It's also one of my favorite books, and he describes this perfectly. So if I don't describe it very well here, this is me butchering it. It's not taken away from his book, because he describes it perfectly. So say you have a outcome-based goal. For example, you want to run 3 miles in 21 minutes. Say that's your goal, and that's the only thing you care about, and you obsess over that. It could be a marathon, whatever it is you decide. So that's more of an outcome-based goal, which is completely fine. It gives you a target to try to hit over time, so I think they are great. But he talks about going a little bit deeper. Now, instead of waking up every day thinking, I want to run that 3 miles in 21 minutes, and that's the only thing you think about, you start to fall in love with the idea of you being a runner. Yeah. So this is more of a identity type of thing. So you view yourself, I want to be a runner. I want to become a runner. Now, someone that has this mentality, it completely not only changes your perception of this whole goal setting process, it also prevents you from doing things that would be opposed to doing being a runner. So for example, if you are a runner, if that is who you are, if that is your identity, that's something you're going to consistently do and you're going to enjoy. If you only have the mentality of, I want to run the 3 miles in 21 minutes and that's all that matters and nothing else, and you don't necessarily view yourself as a runner, that's not part of your identity, that goal is going to be a bit more superficial for you. And if you do achieve it, what happens after that? That's the main thing. What happens after you achieve it? So if you fall in love with the process and it becomes sort of part of your identity, like I'm going to be a fit person. I'm going to be the person that eats healthy. I'm going to be the person that's a runner. And it's more about what you're becoming and the process of it versus just this black and white goal at the end. So this is definitely one of my favorites.
While this is a little less tangible, I would argue that the rest of the list falls underneath this one, because falling in love with the process, when you look at people, whether it's via the internet or them in person or whatever, and you see people who are like really fit and they've got a really great energy and charismatic, and then you see somebody else who's just like I don't know, you can feel the difference if you go out. For those of us who have gone out and explored who's out there, who's presenting information, there's a difference. There's some people out there saying, hey, this is what you have to do, and if you're not doing it, you're doing it wrong. And then there's a whole other group of people who are like, how do we make it work for us, right? The people who are saying, how do we make it work for us, have found a way to incorporate all these things in a way that makes them happier and healthier. They wouldn't be doing it otherwise. Not to say that everybody who's fit and on top of their game is happy and healthy, but when we're talking about the purpose of all of this work, for me, and I bet I would think for you too, Jake, but I won't speak for you, there's a deeper or higher calling beyond being strong or lean. And that is, how do we incorporate these skills into our life to make our life better? Because it doesn't really, if being really buff and lean doesn't make your life better, why'd you do it? You know what I'm saying? So when we take a step back and we kind of reverse engineer it and say, what are we doing and why? Even just not even from a fitness standpoint, but from a life standpoint, we'd say, what are we doing and why? All of a sudden, it becomes a real natural, linear, logical progression backwards, but directly back to being in love with it, enjoying what you're doing. Because if you're enjoying what you're doing, if you're doing taking all these steps and focusing on how you can enjoy your life better, falling in love with the process isn't going to be something you have to do. It's going to happen naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. And one quick thing with that too that I found so interesting about the process versus the outcome. And I know this isn't the same situation because he's an Olympic athlete, but looking at Michael Phelps, who's one of the most successful Olympians of all time, with I forgot the number of golds. I've talked about it on the podcast before. So the thing that was intriguing to me, not in a good way, but especially after, I think it was the 2012 Olympics or something like that, he won again, and he went through severe depression afterward because he won, and it was
Anxiety
like this thought
too.
of, okay, now what? Like there's nothing left past winning the Olympics as far as what you can accomplish as far as outcome. So after that, it's like, okay, who am I now? I did that. There's nothing left. So again, I know that's an extreme example. He's an Olympic athlete, and his whole life was about swimming and all of that. But it's very intriguing to think if we don't just have outcome-based goals, but we think of the process, think of the person we're becoming, and having our identity be a part of that. I think it's going to go a long way. And that person also that loves the process versus just the outcome. Talk about a lifetime dedicated to fitness. If you really love the process, like for me, to be honest, I could never get, if I didn't get any stronger, didn't gain any more muscle, like nothing actually changed for the rest of my life, I would still do the same thing every day. That's how much I love it, because the benefits of it and just loving the process are a lot more important to me than, I want to look like Arnold or what, whatever it is. So
absolutely. And I will say me too, as far as what you just said. And I'll even throw onto that in combination with what you just said and the touching on Michael Phelps. For me, a big part of it is just simply reducing my anxiety. So you can say, we can talk about all the things that we've spent many hours talking about, and we'll continue to talk about. For me, when you get rid of all the stuff, all the details, I do it every single day, because when I am doing a repetition, I have a release of endorphins, and that endorphin release relieves my ample anxiety. Granted, not everybody is like me and has a severe anxiety disorder, but everybody is like me and experiences severe anxiety. You know what I mean?
All right, so let's go through those real quick as we wrap up here. We'll go through those 15. Number 1, consistency. Number 2, making it a routine. Number 3, use fitness to optimize your life. Number 4, train in a way that you enjoy but also challenges you. Number 5, resistance training is for everyone. 6, eat mostly whole foods. Number 7, eat plenty of protein. Number 8, success goes past using the scale every day. Number 9, optimize your sleep. Number 10, progressive overload. Number 11, walk. Number 12, active recovery. Number 13, plenty of sunlight. Number 14, train or practice. And number 15, falling in love with the process. All right, everyone. We hope you enjoyed our content today. If you have been, go ahead and subscribe to the show. And if you could leave us a review and scroll down there on the bottom of your phone, you'll be able to do so. It's going to help grow the show tremendously. We also really would appreciate it. If you would like to find us on Instagram, you can find us at Mission Driven Made. And lastly, we created a free online fitness platform called The Forum. So if you go onto Facebook and type in Mission Driven Made The Forum, or you can just click the link there in the show description, it will take you to the forum, and you can apply to be in it. We'd be happy to have you. It's a place for listeners of the podcast to converse with each other. It's also a place where if you would like to ask Clayton or I any questions regarding fitness, nutrition, mindset, lifestyle, any of that at all, we're on there every day checking and would love to answer any of those questions. Some of them will also end up on later podcast episodes. All right, everyone, we hope you have a fantastic rest of your Friday, and until next time, stay mission driven.